Hi everyone, thanks for joining me once again today. You're watching Thailand Bound. My name's Peter and today I'm going to be reading out 5 viewer stories. Before I do though, I've got a very sad announcement to make. I know a lot of you guys out there, you like my end theme. So when the stories come to the end, there's a 30 second clip of music, very traditional Thai music. I'm going to have to change it. YouTube contacted me in the week and they 5 or 6 of my live stream videos they actually told me I was using copyrighted music, Thai music. Now I'm very careful when I find Thai music. I try to get older music from the 60s and 70s, traditional music, and I try to get it from places where it's not necessarily copyrighted. Like I wouldn't take it from YouTube, for instance. But bearing in mind, I've probably got 200 to 300 stories with this music, the traditional music on the end of it. I just don't want to take the risk anymore. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to change it. As I said, I know a lot of you guys like it. I did try changing it a few weeks ago with a different song, and a few people wrote and said, look, you know, change it back again, which I did. Now, what I'm having to do is go into YouTube's music library and choose something from there. Obviously, it's limited. There's no kind of Thai songs in there. So unfortunately, I've just had to pick a generic song from YouTube and put that on the end of this upload. And from now on, every week, I'm going to use that music instead of the music I normally do, if that makes sense. So the reason I'm taking so long to explain this, why I'm actually explaining this to you guys, is because when I changed it a few weeks ago, I did get people write to me and say, look, you know, don't change your music. I like it. And I'm sure if you walked around a mall in Bangkok and that music came on, the first thing you'd think of is this channel and these stories. So regrettably, but YouTube are very strict now. And, you know, my channel's established now. I just don't want to take the risk any longer. Right, with that out of the way, let's get straight into this week's stories. The first one is probably one of the longest ones I've read out on the channel, but it is very good. And we do have a total of 5 stories today. So let's crack on.
สวัสดีค่ะ
My Thailand journey began in 2006 when I was 38. I had been chatting to a few girls online and one in particular was from Thailand. Her name was Mam. She was around 26 years old and lived in Khon Kaen in Isan with her mother. We would chat every night as she would go to an internet cafe and we would Skype. After about 4 months we decided to meet. So I booked a ticket to Bangkok and she duly arranged some accommodation for us in Khao Sun Road. I knew nothing about Thailand and still didn't research prior to my departure, but what the Mystic East had in store for me would change my outlook on life forever. Stepping off the aircraft onto that steamy tarmac at Don Mueang Airport took my breath away. Would my Thai companion Mam do the same? I still had another couple of hours to ponder that, as she was waiting at the hotel. Walking into the arrivals hall was another oh my god moment. The sea of faces and the swarm of taxi drivers buzzing around like bees, and yes, I did get stung, but I just had to get out of there. The taxi rolls into this neighbourhood that appears to be on overdrive with sights and smells like nothing I had ever experienced, and I had been to many parts of the world. The taxi dropped me off, pointing to a hotel, and then disappeared into the night. To my surprise, there were 3 hotels in the area with similar sounding names, and yes, I was in the wrong one. The receptionist pointed down the road to another hotel with a similar name. The next hotel was also the wrong one, but they tried to book me in. I said, no, I'm sorry, I already have a booking at the other hotel and could you show me where it is? Anyway, I found the correct one in the end and confirmed the booking and headed to my room. I met Mam on the stairs, both a bit startled, and yes, Mam was very beautiful and did take my breath away. I leaned forward to give her a little kiss on the cheek, which she dodged and said, good night, see you in the morning. We had separate rooms and I didn't sleep much that night as my senses were in overdrive. What had I just experienced? Where was I? What sort of a greeting was that? The following day, Mam showed me around Bangkok. We decided to book a trip to Koh Chang. The island was very beautiful and we had a great time exploring the island. Again, we stayed in separate beach bungalows and still no funny business, but getting to know each other better. Mam suggested we go back to Bangkok via Pattaya. Arriving in Pattaya on the bus, I could not believe my eyes. Crazy women hanging out of bars yelling at everyone. I saw one person walking along with a big python around his neck. The Mystic East was unleashing its full assault on my senses this time. We stayed in a hotel just along from Mike's shopping mall, which I would come to frequent more often in the future. I knew nothing of the bar scene in Pattaya or Walking Street. It was truly memorising. At one point, I was walking behind Mam. She was dressed pretty mild, wearing jeans, but I noticed plenty of guys checking her out. I wouldn't say she was an expert on Pattaya or Bangkok, but I am pretty certain she has been on a bit of a journey herself looking for a Westing guy. I wasn't the one, but we would become friends over time, and our birthdays were only one day apart. We would stay in contact over the following years, sharing our quests and adventures, and I am so grateful to have had Mam as my guide for my first experience in Thailand. My second trip to Thailand would see us reunite for one night only when I travelled to Khon Kaen to celebrate our birthday together. This time around, I had been chatting to a couple of girls online, so was eager to catch up with at least one of them. I had told the prettier one that I was coming to Thailand, and so we had arranged to meet up in Bangkok. We met at Ceylon BTS station. She was very cute, but it was all about the shopping. We went to all the usual places, MBK Mall, Jack Market, etc. She said her father was going to take a road trip and asked if I wanted to join them. But by this time, I was already thinking about the other girl I had been chatting with online, and besides, my wallet needed to take a well-earned rest, so I declined her offer and headed off into the night without any accommodation sorted. The second girl was called Nat, and we seemed to hit it off from the start online. I would be introduced to her colleagues when we chatted online. She would mention to me that she was very poor and that her house was basic with no modern amenities. I was planning another trip to Thailand and made sure I had Nat's contact details with me in case I wanted to meet up with her later. As I had no accommodation booked, I headed for Mochit to catch a bus up to Nat's village. After the bus departed Bangkok, I asked the hostess on the bus to chat to Nat on the phone and tell her I was on my way. Well, she was shocked to say the least, and she was not the only one who was in for a shock that night. It was arranged that Nat would come to the bus station to pick me up and she would bring her auntie along with her. They turned up in the latest D-Max pickup truck and we headed back to her small village. We pulled up to a very nice traditional two-storey house, so much for her poverty. Nat was quite a pleasant girl and turned out to have a great sense of humour. It was late, so Nat showed me where I would be sleeping and we all bedded down for the evening. When I opened my eyes in the morning, there was an old man and woman standing over me. Startled was an understatement. They turned out to be Nat's parents who lived in the same house. Nat had to work, so dragged me off to the local school, which was a bit daunting to start with, but turned out a great experience. Over the next couple of days, Nat took me sightseeing and introduced me to her wider family in Buriram. They were all very kind and wouldn't let me pay for anything. It is something I have found quite common amongst the genuine Thai families I have spent time with over the years. The next trip to Thailand was a stopover on the way to Europe from work. As it was a short visit, I decided to hang out in Bangkok and stayed around Soi 30. It was on this trip that I was introduced to a bar that would make a considerable impact on my life in the following years. Although I had now been to Thailand several times, I was unfamiliar with the bar scene. So when my Japanese friend introduced me to the shark-infested waters of the Therme Cafe Lounge with wall-to-wall freelancers, I thought there really is a heaven for men. However, you also had to be careful because you could get eaten alive and your wallet would certainly be the main dish on the menu. I managed to escape unscathed, but the experience of Therme had been deeply embedded deep into my brain for another time. So the next trip to Thailand came around, and this time it was with a friend who was on the bounce from a marriage breakup. So the day before we were due to leave, my friend got cold feet and pulled out. I headed off for my next adventure alone. As usual, I had arranged a new female friend that I would meet up at the airport. She was a girl I had planned to visit years earlier but stood me up at the last minute. We had stayed in contact, so had decided to finally meet. Her and her sister and her brother picked me up from the airport and they drove us to the hotel I had booked. On the way to the hotel, it started, "Tomorrow, are you going to buy me this and are you going to buy me that? Oh, and are you still talking to Mam from Khon Kaen? What the?" I remained pleasant but was now formulating an exit strategy. We arrive at the hotel and they follow us to the room. We entered the room. The shower and toilet was separated from the main area by a glass wall so you could see directly into the bathroom. They started chatting amongst themselves and pointed to the bathroom. She turned to me and said, "I will come back in the morning to pick you up at about 10 a.m, okay? Yes, great, catch you later." So the next morning I got up at 7 a.m, checked out and got the hell out of there. Also on that same morning I received a message from my friend who had got cold feet back home. He had bought another ticket and would be arriving the following evening, so that would give me time to get over to the Nana area and book a couple of rooms for us. I had the day to myself and could chill out. As the day turned to night, it was soon time to head out to grab a bite to eat and look around. I was staying in the soy just next to Therme Cafe, so I found myself on the stairs and was persuaded to go inside. It really is quite daunting until you find a seat and have a beer in front of you. Remember, I was not a regular to the bar scene. I had found a comfortable spot while quite close to the front door. A lot of girls were also sitting around fairly close to me. I am quite happy sipping on my Singer beer, soaking up the atmosphere when I'm distracted by this older, nerdy girl with glasses sitting opposite. She gently slides a bottle top over to me with her finger. At this point we make eye contact and I begin to chat. Her English is pretty good and she has a great figure. She is around 40, probably one of the oldest freelancers there. This lady's name is Choi, and this would be a life-changing acquaintance. After some chit-chat, we ended up back at my hotel to check out each other's stamina levels. The next night I headed to the airport to pick up my friend. The aircraft had landed 2 hours ago and he had still not come out. Eventually he came out and we headed to Nana. He checked into his room, a quick shower and off into the night for his very first time in Thailand. I decided to take him directly to Therme. We had a couple of drinks while he inserted his jaw back into place. It did not take him long to get speaking with a girl, whereupon he told me that him and his new friend are heading back to the hotel. The next morning I went to his room. When the door was opened, it was like a scene from the movie Hangover. The room was trashed, mattress on the floor, broken whiskey bottle. He told me that he had a good time in the room and after some fantastic aerobics, him and his new friend took him to a party. Luckily for him, she brought him back to the hotel afterwards. We had only planned a few days in Bangkok, so the next day we headed to Pattaya with Therme Choi in tow. Spending more time with Choi revealed that she spent most of her time travelling around Thailand and living in temples. She also had a condo in Bangkok that she used as a base. Over the next 18 months I would spend quite a bit of time there and she would travel to Australia and spend time with me. We ended up getting married in Australia. Choi spent less time in Australia, preferring the temples of Thailand. It was a misjudged marriage and we eventually drifted apart. I never spent more than 2 weeks at a time in Thailand because I had a little dog that I loved dearly and he was getting very old and needed me more than ever. I had decided that after my dog passed away, I would set myself up in Thailand and rent a condo for a year. This was 2017. I knew that my soulmate was in Thailand somewhere and that I should base myself there to have the best chance of really finding that special someone. I had met quite a few girls in my time whilst travelling to Thailand, so after my marriage with Therme Choi, it was time to get back on the horse, as they say. About 3 months before I was due to travel to Thailand to arrange a condo, I signed up on Thai Friendly to get a head start. What a head start I got, and as it turns out I hit the jackpot. She was a petite Lao girl called Lawana, working in a beachside area of Chonburi but not Pattaya. Unfortunately for Lawana, she had lost an eye when she was very young, but she was very cute and cheeky. The line chat video flowed very easily and we clicked at once. Lawana worked in a small shop not far from the beach. She came to meet me at the airport when I arrived in Bangkok. She also arranged for a car from Chonburi to pick us up. She had her bag with her, so she joined me in the hotel from the start. Over the next couple of days, we looked at various condos and picked one on the beach with both a ground level pool and a rooftop pool which you could look across the whole bay. I would go back to Australia every 2 months for work, so would do a 2 months on, 2 months off arrangement for the first year. We bought a classic motorcycle and would often ride up to Pattaya for the weekend. The second year, I would also ride to Pattaya a couple of times a week to study Thai, as I was then on a student visa. During the first year, we applied for a tourist visa for Lawana to travel to Australia, but got rejected. The second year, we tried again. This time though, we used an agent and had success. It is now 2022 and we are living happily together in Australia. We have been together now for 5 years. We never fight, we complement and support each other 100%. Lawana got her new eye, which was a dream come true since childhood. We have bought a house together, she got her driving licence, and we are both so thankful that our worlds met. We are both working and preparing for a future in Laos, Thailand and Australia. Her care and love show no boundaries. Many guys have probably lost faith after bad relationships with the wrong girls. But when you meet that right one, the journey, as hard as rocky, becomes smooth as silk. This has been a snapshot of my experience in Thailand over the past 18 years. Thank you for letting me share it with your viewers. So great story, wasn't it, guys? It's always nice to read out a success story because from time to time, there's an old saying, don't shoot the piano player. I'm just reading the stories out. I don't actually write them. They're not my experiences. But sometimes guys will write to me and say, look, these stories are a bit depressing. They're all doom and gloom. Don't you have any positive ones? And I can only read out what's sent to me. But luckily, this was sent to me and this was a success story. And as I say, quite a long story, but it was quite enjoyable. I enjoyed reading it. And obviously, I can't share the pictures that he sent me. Often guys will send me photographs accompanying the stories just to add a little bit of credibility to the story. Even if they don't ask me not to put them on the internet, I would never dream of doing that because privacy is so important to everybody, okay? And she's a lovely looking girl. So thanks for sending that in if you're watching this. Right, let's jump straight into story number 2. I have been enjoying your stories for more than a year and never dreamed I would be sending one in to you. The only reason I am at this point is because A, you've mentioned you're running low, and B, you talked about people that help friends in Thailand on the live stream. I am about your age and my fascination with Thailand began when I was 12 years old. I'm an American overseas brat, non-military, and my family lived in the Philippines and Ethiopia during my childhood. During our second summer in Ethiopia, my father had the great vision to take us all on a 5-country tour of Asia. I was impressed with India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia and Singapore, but far more impressed with Bangkok than either of the others. The food, the night markets, the river markets, the sights, the people, you name it, I thought it was the best city in the world. Decades later, I had never gotten over my desire to make a return trip. I just haven't managed to pull one off yet. About 5 years ago, I decided my return was imminent and I started working on learning Thai. I've continued traveling overseas in my adult life and I no longer go to other countries without making some attempt at learning languages and researching cultural do's and don'ts. I went to Craigslist Bangkok and searched for a teacher. I found one probably a quarter of the price I would pay someone here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We'll call her A for short. A lives in Bangkok but is originally from a farm town. I reached out to her. She responded. We set up our first meeting. At our first class, A greeted me with a typical Thai smile, though she was a bit nervous. I learned later that guys contacted her about being a paid escort. She's a real cutie in a young enough to be my daughter sort of way, as you'll see from the photo I'm attaching. A has zero interest in being a paid escort. As our first class began, she was convinced I was serious about learning Thai and our lesson became relaxed. So did our future lessons. So relaxed that we began to become friends, and sometimes instead of having lessons, she would use our time to get things off her chest. From reading Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus in the 90s, I learned women often just like being heard, so I'd lend a sympathetic ear, and she told me that when she talked with me, she felt stronger, unlike when she tried to share her problems with the Thais. So our friendship developed. We call each other brother-sister, which was her idea. I think of her more as a niece, but she told me I'm like a replacement for her late brother. Fast forward to 2020. As travelling became complicated, A began losing students one after the other. Also, her small business, which depended on tourists and an open city, virtually ended overnight. It became obvious that she would no longer be able to pay for basic necessities. Though she never asked me for money, it was obvious she was going to need help. So I told her my wife and I would send her regular expense money. She didn't agree or disagree, but we began sending it anyway, and she always expresses her gratitude. She also expresses a level of shame as well as the need to pay us back. I told her that when she gets back on her feet, if she can help others in need, it will be all the repayment we need. I think I can honestly say that A and I have lots of trust and respect for each other, and so my sending of support has made no change in our relationship as far as I can tell. I recently mentioned to A how much I love crowded, noisy places like Bourbon Street in New Orleans, and that I looked forward to walk down Soy Cowboy, Walking Street, etc. I also told her I was afraid my wife might not go with me as she hates crowds, but assured her I'd be a good boy, or my wife, who's Brazilian, would bring me home in a body bag. A glared at me, pulled out a pair of scissors and told me if I dared to pay for a bar girl, she would help my wife perform an amputation of sorts. So apparently she still feels comfortable with me. Great. As I said, she's like a niece to me, and I hate to think of the struggles she'd be dealing with if we'd never met. I still remember how my mind worked when I was single in my 20s and 30s, and I'm fairly confident that having this much reoccurring time with such an attractive, fun and feminine woman would have been complicated unless she was content to have a little American puppy dog across the ocean looking longingly at her via Zoom a few hours a week. I likely would have ignored the challenges like our difference in religion and just homed in on what I wished would be. So good thing for her, she ran into me as a happy married old man. Though I hope the worst of the pandemic is over, I urge all of your viewers to make sure their Thai friends are okay, keeping in mind they might not be totally open about their struggles. And as was mentioned on Peter's live streams, Wise is a great way to send money in Thailand. In closing, I'll just say that I can now read and write Thai, still need help with correct spelling, and can have basic conversation. A has been a great teacher and a great friend. So there you go, another nice story there. And he's absolutely right. I did mention in the past on the streams that there's a lot of guys that I talk to with various apps. I talk to guys on apps, and they tell me the same. They're not stupid guys. They're not falling for scams or anything like that. But they've met girls in Thailand who they're quite friendly with. Them not a serious girlfriend. It's just a friend. They might have known them for years. It might not be a girlfriend. It might be a particular staff member. They go to a regular restaurant, and you know they've had 2 years of it. And unlike in the West, they don't have a welfare system. Okay, so if people don't help them, families, they really struggle, and they're proud people. They won't ask for it. I'm not talking about bar girls. I'm talking about regular Thais. Okay. And you know, a lot of the guys I know, they've sent money across to Thailand, and I'm sure it's helped a lot of people out with the necessities of life. So that, you know, fair play to those sort of people. Now, as he quite rightly said, Wise, it used to be called TransferWise, is a very good way to send money to Thailand. The expenses, the costs that they charge, there's no exchange rates. It's just a small fee, and I've sent money to Thailand several times for various business reasons, and it is cheap to do that, and it's a good way to send money to Thailand. It's cheaper than the banks. It's much cheaper than Western Union or something like that. So I'll put a link in the description. After you've listened to the stories, you can go onto the Wise website and see what it's all about, and I use it myself, so I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't use the app myself. Okay, right, let's jump into story number 3. One evening, I was go-go hopping and ended up at the Baccarat bar on Soy Cowboy when I saw the most gorgeous dancer on stage. Her face was a 7 or an 8, but her body was a hard 10. Perfect, top hourglass figure and shapely behind. As bodies go, I don't think I ever saw anything better. I called her over for a drink and ordered a shot of tequila for the both of us. We may have had another, and I asked if she wanted to leave with me to shoot pool and bar hop all night. She agreed, and I paid her bar fine, and she went to change and came back looking stunning as ever. That night we hit a few go-go bars, having drinks at each one, playing pool till around 1 or 2 a.m. At the end of the night we went back to my hotel, and she said she needed to shower. I hung back and let her do her thing. Around 10 minutes later she poked her head out of the bathroom and said she was sick. I was kind of disappointed, but I said it's okay, she can leave if she wants to. She said I was a nice man and gave me her line information. She said she had a car and told me to call her tomorrow and she would show me around Pattaya, and again was sorry she couldn't stay. I said it's okay and I hope she feels better. I never did end up calling her the next day, but several days later, towards the end of my vacation, I was back in Baccarat and saw her again. She excitingly came up to me and said she wanted to go out with me again. I was hesitant because of our last encounter, but her body was amazing and I decided to throw the dice. So I know many of your viewers will be thinking, just take her straight back to the hotel. That's not why I come to Pattaya. First, there's nothing worse for me than sober aerobics with a stranger. I feel awkward and you're just not comfortable with each other yet. Secondly, I come to Pattaya for the drinking and playing games with the girls. Anything else is a nice bonus. So we head out again for the evening, but this time I tell her, don't try and keep up with me, just drink what you want and when you want. We do a repeat of the last time and go bar hop, but this time she is having one drink to every 3 or 4 of mine. So everything seems to be going well. We are rating the girls on stage, playing pool, laughing and joking and having a good time. I am not monitoring her drinks, but she seems to be doing fine. I do notice though that she is drinking like a high schooler. Jack and Coke, then rum and Coke, vodka cranberry, vodka orange juice. She's mixing all of her alcohols. I'm under the impression that she drinks for a living, so she should probably know her limits since this is something she does literally every day. I'm guessing she was around 25 years old as well, so this wasn't her first rodeo. Eventually, we make it back to the hotel. My room has a balcony and overlooks a beach. When you're sitting outside, you can still hear the sounds of the nearby go-go bars, and you can also people watch the freelancers on Beach Road. One of my favourite things to watch is the freelancers fishing for customers on Beach Road from my balcony. I usually make bets with myself, betting whether a customer will end up going with a girl when they approach them. It's a fun thing to watch. So I suggest we go for one final drink on the balcony to close the night. Let me reiterate, at this stage, she seems fine. I can tell she's been drinking, but she isn't loud or obnoxious or doing any of the telltale signs someone has drank too much. We talk and watch the fishing going down below, and after I'm done with my cigarette, we head inside. She sits on the bed and leans back and we continue talking, and I'm leaning against the wall. I tell her I need to use the restroom and figure when I get out, we'll take showers and settle in for the evening. I'm in the bathroom maybe 10 minutes, and when I come out, I see that she has taken off all of her clothes and is only wearing one of my t-shirts. Unfortunately, she is kneeling on the floor with her head completely in the trash can. Now, I don't mean she's leaning over the trash can in case she gets sick. I mean she is kneeling there with her head in the trash can all the way up to her shoulders. I loudly exclaim, "Baby, what did you do to yourself?" I think it is all rather amusing until she takes her head out of the trash can. She does not look good. I've seen people drink too much, but she was looking like she was on death's door, which is amazing because 15 minutes ago she looked fine. So now I'm really worried, and she tells me she needs to call her girlfriend. She dials a number and hands me the phone. I tell her friend what has happened, and her friend responds as if this is a weekly occurrence. Within 10 minutes, her friend knocks on my door and I ask if I should dial 911, but her friend insists she is fine and will take care of her. As I am writing this, I now realise that they probably had no idea what I meant with 911, as that is an American emergency number and probably means nothing to them in Thailand. So they leave, but this time my poor friend is looking worse for wear, but no longer looks as she did when I first came out of the bathroom. I cannot tell you the elation I felt once the door closed after they had left. I am completely sympathetic to her, and I hope nothing bad happened, but at the same time, I'm a foreigner in their country. I did not want a dead bar girl in my room and end up in a Thai prison because she couldn't handle her alcohol. I texted her the following day, but I didn't get a response. Admittedly, I was a little worried about her, but I figure she may still be recovering. 2 days later, she sent me photos of her wristband from the Pattaya Memorial Hospital and a bag from there with a date on it. She said she needed to go to the hospital and they gave her fluids and just told her to rest. Wow, that could have gone south fast. I really can't believe that happened, as I didn't think she drank that much, but everyone's tolerance is different. The second to last day of my trip, she texted me again and said she wanted to see me because despite having taken her out twice, we never spent an entire night together. It wasn't her day off, so I invited her over for dinner at the restaurant at my hotel. Then we went and got a massage. She was under the impression that we were going to spend the night together, but I made up some excuse and I wished her well. As I said, I come to Patti for the party atmosphere, and I want my company to be able to enjoy the nightlife with me, and I'm sure she couldn't handle it. So, you know, that's one of those things that still amazes me to these days, until today, is these girls, the amount of alcohol they can drink, just so much. You know, they're very petite bodies, quite young girls, anywhere between 20 and 30 upwards, and the amount of alcohol they drink, even after all this time, still shocks me. And one of the big differences is that if you haven't been to Thailand before and you go out to a bar, a nightclub, maybe a Thai nightclub, something that's quite shocking is in the West, I've got a couple of daughters, and if they go out to a club or a bar, they'll order a vodka Coke or a Jack Daniels and Coke or maybe a beer, but they don't do that in Thailand. You'll get a group of 4 or 5 young girls go into a nightclub, and they'll all order, every table, they'll order black label whiskey. Young girls, black label whiskey. They get all these mixes with them, sodas and cokes, and that's what they drink. So you'll see all these tables in a Thai nightclub, lots of young girls, lots of young guys, and they're all drinking black label whiskey. It's really strange, but as I said, the amount of alcohol that they drink, it is truly amazing. Okay, I'm going to jump straight into story number 4 now. This is quite a short story, but just an experience of a couple in Phuket. My wife and I planned a cruise out of Phuket in 2013-14. It was going to Krabi, Penang and Singapore return. We were just doing the Phuket to Penang trip and returning when the ship came back to Penang, then back to Phuket. The ticket said that the ship left from the old Phuket town port, first time using this port as they usually leave from Patong Beach on the other side of the island. We arrived the night before the cruise and were staying in a nearby hotel, so we settled in for the night and enjoyed some of the nighttime nightlife, only what a married man can get away with, in brackets. Just some good food, a few beers and people watching. The next day we saw a ship anchored off Patong Beach, but was not sure if it was our ship or not. My wife was worried it was our ship, so I went down to the beach jetty where all the passengers were arriving and departing for the day's outings and spoke to a crew member. They assured us that the ticket will be correct and that the port will be the place to depart from. So we packed our bags and later that day took a hotel taxi to the port on the other side of the island. The driver was confused, tried several places like the PP Island departure places, and no one knew where the ship was departing from. Finally, after 40 minutes of driving around, we found the correct departure point. The port official said that it was the correct place. We were just a week early as they were still using Patong as a departure point on this trip. Bloody travel agents. To my wife's total panic, and the ship in Patong Harbour was our ship, and we had a boarding time on our ticket of 1800 and it was now nearly 1700. We had to get to the other side of the island very, very fast. The problem was a storm hit and the traffic was slow. The driver was amazing and we arrived at the dock just in time, only to be told that the departure time had now been changed till 10 p.m. My wife nearly had kittens all the way back. The poor taxi driver, he only received a few extra baht as we'd used up most of our baht already. All good. In the end, we hopped aboard and had a stiff drink to relax. Anyway, we have done approximately 25 overseas trips and never missed a flight or ship yet, touch wood. Okay, so a very, very short one there. But yeah, you know, when you're in Thailand, just double check all the information you get. Because okay, so always check your directions with more than one person. Okay, let's get into the last story today. And this should be a little bit of a warning to some people out there. And without spoiling the end, you'll realize as I'm reading it. In 1994, aged 34, on my 4th solo trip to Thailand, I went to the island of Koh Phangan to party for the full moon chill for a few months. I had been there many times and never had a problem. I booked into a cheap bungalow that I had stayed at before, and I knew the owner and that weed was widely available. Most days were spent just chilling on the beach and going into Hadrin for food and movies most evening. Life was good. I'm a bit of a loner and enjoy my own company, but I had made friends with some travellers who were staying at the same set of bungalows. Full moon came and it was time to party. A group of us headed over to the sunrise of Had Rin about 9 p.m. for the beach rave. This was my 13th full moon party and turned out to be unlucky 13 for me. I knew the score and about undercover police being at the party, but had a couple of joints on me. Around 2 a.m. I decided that I had had enough of the party and headed back to the bungalow. On the sand track back, I lit up a joint. A couple of minutes later, I could hear a motorbike coming up behind me, but thought nothing of it. Until I heard voices and felt myself being pushed to one side. A hand was on my shoulder and two Thai guys were holding me. I flicked the joint into some bushes. They asked me where I was from. I said the UK. Then one of them started to search my pockets while the others started to look in the bushes for the joint. I had a bunch of cash on me, which he took out of my pocket, and I told him to take it, but he put it back. Then he found my cigarette packet and the other joint inside. Meanwhile, the other guy had found the joint I flicked away. They told me to get between them on the motorbike and we started to drive. Just then, I saw some friends who were staying at the same bungalows and shouted to them that I had been arrested and to get the bungalow owner. We went a few hundred metres to a concrete building behind a set of bungalows with a group of Thai men standing around. They took me to a table where there was a Farang guy sitting and handcuffed us together. I said drugs and he said yes, and to be honest, it was a relief I wasn't alone in this. His name was Dan and he was from Australia. After a while, the owner turned up and I told him I'd been arrested. I knew I was in big trouble and I wanted out of this situation. I asked him how much did they want. He spoke to them and told me 50,000 baht. My head was so scrambled I mistakenly calculated that was over £10,000. Then Dan said it was just over £1,000. Okay, I said no problem and assumed we would pay the money and be let go. Luckily it was the start of my trip and I still had the money. We were then told to get in the back of a pickup truck and driven to the local police station and taken upstairs and locked in the cells with 3 Thai guys and just enough room to lay down. The next morning we were taken into an office and told we had to pay 50,000 bail and hand over our passports. I was in a panic as I had weed and hash laying around on my bed in the bungalow and had thought the police may search it. Luckily they didn't. Instead I give the owner my key, told him to get rid of the drugs and to bring my bum bag with my passport and traveller's checks inside. Dan's travelling buddy had been located and brought his passport and money. Still locked in the cells, the next day the owner came and told us we had to pay another £200 each for the drugs to be sent to Bangkok to be analysed, which Dan and I paid. Turns out the owner and the police chief were ripping us off. After 4 days in the cells where we were released on bail, the next few weeks we spent on the island on bail, and during this time we met 2 American girls. Then it was time that we were due in court on the mainland in Surat Thani. We had to report to the police station in Koh Phangan, and it turns out we were not alone. 3 other Farangs, including one female who had she had to phone her parents for her bail money, were up for the same offence. We took the night boat to Surat Thani and then to the courts and locked in the holding cells. There was a Farang guy in there who was shackled and chained and had just spent 4 weeks in jail in Surat Thani because he didn't have the 50,000 baht bail money and he was in a bad way. We had to report to the police station in Koh Phangan, and it turns out we were not alone. 3 other Farangs, including one female who had to phone her parents for her bail money, were up for the same offence. We took the night boat to Surat Thani and then to the courts and locked in the holding cells. There was a Farang guy in there who was shackled and chained and had just spent 4 weeks in jail in Surat Thani because he didn't have the 50,000 baht bail money and he was in a bad way. In court, we were fined 5,000 baht each. We were to be deported from the country. We all boarded a minibus and set off for Bangkok. Okay, I was pissed off with the whole situation and admit I was winding the guards up all the way to Bangkok, stopping for a toilet break. Dan told me to calm down and I shouted, "What are they going to do, shoot us?" Yes, they had guns. When we got to the detention centre in Bangkok, I was separated from the others and taken into a cell where I got the shit kicked out of me by 4 Thai policemen. broken nose, broken rib and a good beating. Yes, I deserved it for winding them up. We spent the next days in one of the holding cells, 70 to a cell which should hold 30 with just enough room to lay down. The American girls were fantastic, bringing food every day and smuggling in cigarettes for me, and also contacting the British and Australian foreign embassies who came to visit us. Dan got released back to Australia, and a few days later I boarded my flight to the UK. We all got our 50,000 back minus a 5,000 baht fine. Believe me, this could have been so much worse. Years in custody, I'm told, so don't do it. You know, I've always preached about not doing drugs in Thailand. They're very, very strict, very harsh penalties. Of course, some people will probably leave comments and say drugs, marijuana has now been legalized in Thailand, which it has, but I very much doubt that. Thailand's going to become the new Amsterdam of Southeast Asia. If you look into the legalized marijuana, it's actually a medical grade marijuana. It's not the same as the happy backy. There's different elements, and I'm not an expert. I'm not going to go into it, but I've read some bits about it. So if you're going over to Thailand and you're hoping to have a drug-fueled holiday, forget it. You won't. And if you take the risk and you do it illegally, you could end up in jail. I don't want to be one to preach here, but guys, if you can't do without drugs, don't go to Thailand. That's the best advice I could give you. Right, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me today. As always, there'll be more stories next Saturday. A quick reminder, 9 p.m. UK time will be my live stream. It'd be great if you could come along and join in. There's always a good crowd. I think we had 400 plus last Friday. You can come in, add your comments, ask questions. I'll try and respond as best as I can. If you're not into the live streams, as I always say, hang on in there till next Saturday and there'll be a whole bunch of more stories. All right, thanks for watching and I'll see you all soon.